All right, welcome everybody to the November 2022 meet of the second division. Apologies first, Robert Letha had a medical problem come up today and he will not be here to present. He has a 3 o'clock doctor's appointment. On the other hand, that means we'll probably get out a little early today, and that gives us more time to go visit Bill's layout in McMinnville. So I don't think I have any actual business. The only announcement is that second division is going to have a couple of tables at the Rick Rial swap meet on December 3rd, the one that's held at the Polk County Fairgrounds. And you're welcome to come see all the stuff. We'll take donations and we'll definitely take assistance in manning the table. Beyond that, next meeting should be in January, 3rd Saturday, and the same room. And Greg, you had your hand up.
So since we didn't have the October meeting, I brought the kits. If you didn't grab one in September, grab a few, put something together, bring it to January's meeting and show us what you made with our wonderful donated items. So whatever doesn't get picked out of those boxes today will be taken to Rick Rial and sold. Or try to get money for it.
Yeah. And I think, Greg, you're the judge, aren't you?
Yes.
If only to keep you from winning.
Yes, I will be judging.
Larry?
Prize is yet to be determined.
Yes, well, it will be gift certificates somewhere. It may be winner's choice, actually.
Perfect.
And with that, Bill, let me launch your video.
Okay.
Your PowerPoint.
Hi, guys, I'm Bill Decker, and at least I am here. Which is actually, this is kind of a reverse of what happened in Eugene for me, because I've been exposed to COVID just the week before. Went through all the proper protocols. It turned out I was and did 2 tests 24 hours apart, just in time to get down to Eugene to present. What most of what you're going to see today is that Eugene Regional Convention presentation. It's a little bit mixed from where I was, but I thought since we had so few folk in Eugene, there's actually some, what I think is some interesting modeling information contained within this. Some techniques that a lot of people may not think of just immediately, but are worthy of your consideration as you go. So I'm going to talk about, give you a tour, a photographic tour of my SP Cascade line, something that Craig knows well. He's one of my regular crew. It is an operating model railroad of the Southern Pacific, attempting to model significant pieces of the SP's crossing of the Cascades, Eugene to Summit, or Cascade Summit and beyond. Operating, here we've got an operating crew at work at what is actually my Wikipedic site. And that is my rendition of Salt Creek Trestle, and Highway 58 is Pass Highway is running along right under it, as it does in reality. The tunnel isn't quite so close, but it is there. Okay, so with that, I figured we'll give you the layout tour and then recent developments, which is to say, you're going to see what my COVID projects were. If you didn't have a COVID project, you missed an opportunity. And why am I not
Try that.
advancing?
Who knows, but here you go.
Well, let you advance it and I'll use the clicker for the thing. Okay, just to how I'm organized here, I've got some introductory material. Then we'll go through the layout tour and then move on to the COVID projects. The presentation for Eugene was explicitly aimed at Eugene and Springfield area modeling just because of its location. Anybody here who knows me very well, and Greg, you'll understand here in a moment why them there's fighting words. I'm a native of Corvallis. I bleed orange and black.
It was 14-7 when I left the house.
Okay.
21 seconds.
Wow.
I'm almost ready to score again.
Okay, next slide. Okay.
Try the other clicker.
It's the other direction. So what are we talking about? On the map of Oregon, we're talking about the line from Eugene through Springfield, up through Oak Ridge, to the summit and just beyond to Crescent Lake. Historically, steam era days actually up through 1964, this was all part of the Portland division of the SP, which terminated at Crescent Lake and changed over to the Shasta division there. Which is, I took advantage of, I made that my upper end staging. Just to put it in further context and inspiration, this great shot Will Turnbull took from the then brand new CTC signal at the railroad west end of Oak Ridge. If that doesn't inspire folk, I don't know, that are in the model railroad hobby, I'm not quite sure what will. Because that mix in there, that active steam plus the fancy streamliner and the freight being headed by Fs, very common there by then. Bring ourselves forward, fast forward to 1972, and this is what you would see up there on the hill. Salt Creek Trestle, and there's Highway 58 down there. Heavy units slogging their way uphill and mid-train manned helpers. That happens to be the Toledo hauler power being used on the weekend up on the hill as helper power. My SP Cascade line is built in a walkout basement. Those of you who come for layout tour, you'll be entering through here. The front of the house is up here, and there's a pathway around to here. So it represents the area from Eugene through Springfield on around to Oak Ridge, starting the climb up to McCready Springs, through Wickapee, over the Trestle, up through Crozat. See, I took advantage of the fact that there is a stretch of the railroad that's 2 levels within the same immediate geographic area, and eventually around out to Cascade Summit, and then skirting around from there, we actually pick up on this upper level, the upper level 12-track staging yard at Crescent Lake. We'll see more of that in a moment. We were blessed with the resources to build a custom house, which means I got a railroad room with a thick ceiling. And I used most of the overall footprint's 2,800 square feet, and I nominally say about 2,400 of it is me. Actually, even that exercise room over there gets used as the dispatch office during operation. So it's loop to loop. 84 is what I'm currently running equipment for, but I will get back into the 50s. I actively have got equipment out, and I'm looking at, okay, I got to put decoders in all this 1950s equipment, other than a few plastic steam locomotives, cab forwards, but other than that, I've got to put the decoders in everything, and that will occupy me for a couple of years probably, in addition to other things. The railroad is fairly generous on curves, 42 inches on the main line and 36 for the secondary tracks. There is a pinch point, in Oak Ridge, there's where I get down to 32 inches, but that's just in the engine facility. And being an SP modeler, even with an extensive steam roster that all needs decoders, I know that those KTM built locomotives will get around much tighter curves than I have on this railroad. I'm fortunate on that. Railroad is the grade is the 1.8% grade. That's the historic value above Oak Ridge. And I use NCE DCC. Yeah, it's an operating model railroad. It's prototype based. You'll see this again. And anybody who wants is the blog that I keep documenting what I'm doing. Inspiration, of course, came not only having grown up in Oregon and actually of an SP family. My grandfather worked at headquarters of the SP. The pair of books by Ed and Tom's later separate color book. Plus, I had the great joy for quite a while here to operate occasionally, and Stan, you did too.
Yeah.
On Tom Dill's layout. Tom was a great guy. I really miss him. You will find another tribute buried in here as I go. Yeah, we've been blessed to have this fairly well documented. There is additional documentation. Joel Ashcroft, current day engineer on the line, has maintained for quite a long while a SP and the Cascades website. The SP group, discussion group on the internet, there's a separate one for SP in Oregon as well. Those actually do exist. Just another schematic view. We're going from Eugene through Springfield, Oak Ridge, and then starting the climb right out of Oak Ridge to McCready Springs, Wikipe, Cruzat, Cascade Summit, and then on to Crescent Lake. Selection criteria for the mountain sidings were all of those had train order offices back in the day. There are one or two other sightings between each of those sightings in the real life. So we'll begin the photo tour. Start down at Eugene and the arrival departure yard. Note, just me fumbling. Note that that's Crescent Lake up overhead, and the clearance underneath is 7 feet, and I was honest about that. John Brock, who lives in the Corvallis area, is a friend of mine from way back, including when we were in the south end of the San Francisco Bay Area, both of us working down there. John used to stand at 6'10". And I expected when I started this railroad that John might actually show up someday. It turned out he did retire back to Oregon. And I needed to account for that. And at 6'4" originally myself, you know, I'm sensitive to that question as well. So anyway, so the upper level staging is overhead, somewhat directly over and somewhat overlapping. And it works out well. It's kind of a mushroom in this zone right in here. So that's the main arrival departure yard. Traffic flow is that road trains depart and arrive here. Whereas my classification yard, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of prototype perspective a little bit later, is over here. It's enough to handle the traffic on the modeled railroad. The Eugene Depot complex is there. In between here and there is this pass through. Right overhead of where this picture is taken is the stairwell leading down. So, and I had to very vigorously monitor the construction of the house to make sure that I had the clearance that I had specified between that wall and a closet right over here. I did make it, but they had to make a little bit of, there was a plumbing adjustment that had to be made at an appropriate time when it was still easy to do. And we'll talk more about this area, but this is all part of my COVID project is in here, in addition to actually adding an extra main track. So Eugene, and continuing on in Eugene, we're going to talk about how to do some of those structures. Moving on across the Willamette River into Springfield, and it is indeed right across the bridge is where the former Borden, now Arkland chemicals, wood chemical processing for glues, basically. Plant is right there along the river in Springfield. Into Springfield, past the depot, and we'll talk about all of this. And Springfield actually represents a significant part of the industry. those of you who know the area at all know that Eugene and Springfield are kind of very closely coupled by the Willamette River, and both have significant industry over time. Finally, swinging around the curve here past Rossboro Lumber, this is a very small condensation of a very large and still functioning lumber mill. Continuing on around the curve, what I call the Marcola branch, which includes a pair of tracks that are part of the interchange with Weyerhaeuser, the significant customer there just out on the northeast end of Springfield. There was significant interchange traffic. There's also running up from 28th Street is another wood chemical plant. And then historically out along there was agricultural business. Continuing on in this way, condensing 40 miles into about 30 feet, we get into Westford. And again, representing Western Lumber, originally called Western Lumber. Towards the end, it was owned by Heinz Lumber. Or as usual with lumber mills, they burned, but so it's no longer there. The mill, Western Lumber, actually had the contract to mill all of the timber that was felled to build the Cascade Line. And then into Oak Ridge. As I contemplated this railroad over the years, I came to understand that Oak Ridge was the heart and soul of the whole operation. It's right in my railroad, it's right in the middle, but it's it is where historically, and you saw that inspiration photo early on, the Will Turnbull shot, it's where the steam helpers were put on before the significant grade kicked in. Continuing on upgrade then, now we're definitely climbing the 1.8. We go past what is known colloquially as Rooster Rock, not to be confused with the one along the Columbia, but it's known as Rooster Rock. Monteith Rock is its official name. Through McCready Springs and into Wikipedia, which is for me is on the wrong side of Salt Creek Trestle, but my trestles are in the correct order. My sidings are in the correct order. They're just offset by one siding's worth. It's a compromise that you have to get to when you're designing a model railroad, even when you have mega space, which I think most of us would acknowledge I have been blessed with. You still have to, it's always compromises that you're doing. And another shot, train crossing Salt Creek Trestle. Salt Creek Trestle represents the middle of the climb on both my railroad and in reality. And so the climb does continue on from there. Again, it's the signature scene of the railroad. When you come in my back door and look to your right, that's what you'll see. Completing the climb, I actually ended up building all three of the steel viaducts on the line. So first we get Noisy Creek, and yes, we have the galleried snow and rock sheds, which are another signature element of the Cascades, through Cruzat, which in steam days, Wikipedia down below it was the habitual water stop halfway up the grade. And Cruzat was a mandatory, if you hadn't done it before, and there's only one siding before it, wheel cooling stop on the way, and inspection on the way down. Remember, back in the days of steam, you had to set retainers. So out of Cruzat, we go over to the third and final Shady Creek, and then through Tunnel 5. And around ultimately through the summit. The tunnel was back over behind there and into the summit. Sorry, the lights really blasted me on this, but the Cascade Summit, which had quite a village, company village up there. In steam days, there was a tunnel that was single-ended at the summit. That was the tail of the Y. It was just big enough to put a cab forward into. with maybe about 10 feet to spare between the points and the rear end of it. And yes, there were attempts to enlarge the tunnel. Misbegotten attempts that occasionally somebody would back a little too hard back there, but they kept getting back out of it. So that's the for turning. And when I eventually turn the clock back and get into the 50s and have cab forward helpers, they'll have to turn there. Still useful if we need to turn snow equipment. Then we are rolling into around from here and around the 90-degree turn. We come eventually into Crescent Lake and the upper level staging. That's the railroad. That's a real quick tour of the railroad. Train control, we're currently using direct traffic control. We're still dark territory. It takes quite an effort to put in the signals. I'm wired, at least at the track level, to put in detection, but that has not yet happened. There always seems to be higher priorities of things. I employ direct traffic control, which is what SP's answer was instead of track or control. It's basically block by block rather than a more open form with TWC. And here we got Dave Holden that you guys should recognize, and that's actually Tom Dill taking his turn. Similarly, for quite a while on the railroad, I was blessed with Rick Kang coming up from Eugene, a retired dispatcher on the SP and on this very line. And he carved out for himself the job of assistant chief dispatcher, and that's an upper level one, and then the crew caller down below that. But Rick correctly noted that I, as layout owner, could not perform the crew calling function or any of the, or really the whole kind of wrestling ringmaster thing that the assistant chief dispatcher could do, because I was always putting out fires. The nature of being the owner of the layout, you're the one who has to troubleshoot. And Rick Andrews is down here just doing a normal dispatch job. Sadly, we have lost both Tom and Rick, and we lost Rick just a little over a month ago. But age is catching up to all of us. Okay, so now I'm going to segue into that very Eugene and Springfield focused part of the talk. And a lot of this is stuff that I fleshed out seriously during all of the lockdown. It was absolutely great to have a hobby like we enjoy during lockdown. And I took full advantage of that time. Almost wish I had another lockdown to move the railroad along, but I don't want to have any of the rest that went along with it. So Eugene and Springfield, and my Eugene, I will say, is prototype inspired, but constrained by this space that I could devote to it and the design crew size. On those points, the space, it would be easy to consume my entire basement and more with the Eugene yard complex. And I just had to trim that down and keep it in balance with the rest of what I wanted to do. As to design crew size, I had set a goal in my design that I wanted to be able to have what I called satisfying operations with a crew of only a half dozen. My normal crew is 15, 16, 17. But I had seen through the years that even the best of operating model railroads oftentimes get into a lull where people's schedules conspire and they just can't really get that full desired crew that they have. So I said, okay, I gotta, I'll take a stab at it and say that I've got to be able to do it with 6. That meant that I could devote only one person to being in the yard. That helped me to keep that yard design constrained. It's still huge and it still consumes what in a normal crew consumes a half dozen people. but I had to start somewhere on it. Yeah, local operations is a perspective. I enjoy kicking around cars. I had a useful piece of information in the SPINS diagram, that Southern Pacific Industry Numbering System. They're one of the first railroads to create these diagrams, and others took off with it the same. And really, it's a kind of a 1960s and later innovation. The set I have are from 1977. This is the depot area on the SPINS diagram, and not only do I have the depot, but Lyons Furniture used to be Rubenstein's. I've got that on the railroad. I've got the freight house. I've got Portland Electric and Plumbing. I've got North Coast Supply. I've got Oregon Egg, Pierce Freight, Eugene Planing, Nabisco. I've actually kicked to a slightly different location, but it's there, and Zellerbach. So now you can start seeing the way that I went through the process that I went to specify industry on my railroad, is that I'm basing it on something that really existed. Just another perspective on Eugene, from the depot area out here to Irving is about 6.5 miles. And that's pushing 100 tracks wide. You're not going to model that, and certainly not in HO scale, not figure out a way to operate it. Anyway, critically out here along the line going to Coos Bay was another yard in this area, the Blair Street yard, which was the industrial support yard for quite a bit of industry out here on the north end of Eugene along the Coos Bay line. And I picked up on that so that my yard, and we'll talk a bit more about it, my classification yard is really serving a function very close to what Blair Street historically did. And yes, I have permission from Ed Austin, who drew this diagram. It's a foldout from that book to show you this. That's the main complex of the Eugene Yard back in its heyday of 1969. That's just way too much to model. So you select. And yeah, I think Blair Street is over here. That's just that small industrial support yard, quote unquote. I have a little, maybe a track or two more than it had, but Tom Dill, when he started operating, he says, "Hey, you've actually done the Blair Street yard." I said, "Yeah, that's good." So it gave me some kind of a connection. This is not a COVID project. This has been on the railroad for quite a while. It's simply a matter of taking a Walters kit that looks kind of sort of like the real Eugene Depot. Go back to that statement earlier. I'm from Corvallis. Eugene is a fiction. Sorry, Craig, you lived there for a while. So I'm not too troubled by the fact that my depot doesn't look exactly like the Eugene Depot. If I ever live long enough and I'm looking around for a project, maybe I'll build it. But otherwise, it serves pretty well. Eventually, I've got to build using this piece of the second kit. I need to build a separate Railway Express Agency building, which would be located just down there. The freight depot, this was just prior to lockdown. What you're seeing is pretty close to the only information I had on the freight house at Eugene. From that picture, I had to somehow create a freight house. I knew the freight house was there, it just historically, but nobody had ever bothered particularly to take photos. So what I ended up doing was working from SP Common Standard design practices, architectural practices. There are 4 freight depots that appear in the Signature Press book, Henry Bender's book on Common Standard SP depots. That I was able to base some of this off of, and what I could kind of put together from this photo and a couple more that show just little snippets of the building. But I could end up with something that has the look and feel definitely of an SP freight station. That station sign on top historically was there. It doesn't show in this photo. There is a picture of the very similar depot at Salem that has a sign just like that. So, hey, that's a neat feature to make sure that I have. So I scratch built that. I mean, just it's a pretty simple structure to build. Though I did ultimately find a source of plastic embossed asphalt shingles that I could use. It was actually long enough for that whole structure, so I didn't have to splice a roof section. That was nice. And similarly, the roof sections are just under the standard large size evergreen sheet that you can get. So anyway, so that's how I got to that. Zellerback Warehouse was definitely a COVID project. It's just a flat against the building, but you can see it back there in that photo. And I was playing around with quite a bit, and you'll see more of this as we go. This is siding that starts as a PDF file from Clever Models. PDF meaning that even somebody like me on a Mac can use it. There are other structure siding computer file outfits out there, but most of them are aimed naturally enough at the PC environment and not really available to me. But the Clever Models does it just fine for me. I can pick this stuff out and print it on 65-pound cardstock, laminate it to foam core, and you really cannot tell looking at this. And I would challenge you to come out and see me this afternoon. You can't tell even from there that that isn't 3D. It is that compelling. Lance Mendheim and the national press has been kind of advocating these photo textures for quite a while. I too am on that bandwagon now. It is amazingly effective. When I got that one done, this is definitely one of the cases when that showed up in my blog. I got a note from Breezy Gust, who also had been a dispatcher at Eugene. Steve Gust is known as Breezy. Breezy had spent his early part of the career as a clerk at the depot, and this structure is not very far from the depot. We're actually not very far from the depot for this picture. And Breezy says, "Yep, you captured it." Man, it's nice when people who actually know the territory look at it and say, "Yes, that actually you're capturing something that I remember." The same fashion, and I'll just go back here. Eugene Planing is this structure right here, and this gantry crane right there is a prominent feature even into the 60s when this picture was taken. And that needed to be captured. It also shows in a number of other photos that Tom Dill both put into his books and some additional photos that I've seen from him. Because there was I think it's Lincoln Street was very near here, like right along there between there and Zellerback. And so it was a common grade crossing that people took pictures at. Right? So back in the day, that was prominent. So this is the mock-up for it. The gantry is actually the final model. It still needs the hardware on the track, but it is otherwise there. It includes the 3 electrical lines running across. It's the way they fed the electrical power to the gantry cart out there. So that was my rendition. Again, just chopping up quickly, putting foam core. And this is after the railroad had been operating for several years, but it was high time that you finally start populating the locations on the railroad instead of having a folded index card with an industry name on it. We all do it. I'm glad that I've moved largely beyond that now. Okay, the North Eugene industrial area is truly my COVID project. Right now, and what kicked it off was that at my first operating session on the full railroad, full main line, June of 2015, both Tom Dill and Rick Kane came up to me and said, Bill, you need to extend the WP siding. Well, what's that? This track here, the unoccupied track, is actually the main line. In typical SP practice, there's another track between the main line and the depot. In this case, it's called the WP siding. That has to do, it's named after the construction outfit that actually built the Coos Bay line. What I ended up doing, originally, my original track plan had everything neck back down to this track and go into the reverse loop staging. Indeed, that's the switch that split between the two ends of the reverse loop. Well, in that moment, when Tom and Rick had both come to me on it and said, you need to extend the WP siding, I suddenly understood something that had totally eluded me in probably 2 decades of studying the diagrams in Ed and Tom's book on SP in Oregon, on the Eugene part of it, that SP from the railroad west switch out here at the depot all the way up to Irving, 6.5 miles up, they had 2 main tracks running with lots of crossovers and ABS signal. That's the way you keep an important terminal fluid. You take the dispatcher out of it, it's all yard limits, and you signal it for safety, but not for command. And anyway, so I had this project to do, and I knew quite quickly after that comment in June, by a week after that session, I had figured out that I was going to, in order to accomplish it, I was only going to be able to connect to what has become my departure end of the arrival departure yard to fully connect. I could do it, but it was going to take 5 double slip switches to do it.
Boy. Like,
don't go there lightly. In August of 2015, the national convention, I met with Tim Weris of Fast Tracks and purchased number 8 tooling for a number 8 double slip switch. What Tim didn't tell me was that, oh, by the way, for 8s and above, you actually need to have a moving frog in addition to moving points. I don't know quite what a moving frog is even to this day, but I knew that that was going to be way beyond the complexity level that I was willing to put up with. So I got to searching, and I remembered good reports from several long-term model railroad friends of Pico track components. They fortunately were available. I mean, this is a period of time when Shinohara has just gone out of business, Walters hasn't yet spun up. Pico's almost the only game in town. Unfortunately, they had a code 83 that they call it a unifrog, which means that you can either wire the frog hot or have it cold, insulated. I have gone, everything on my railroad is hot. All my frogs are hot. They're all switched. Anyway, so I took 5 double slip switches. There are elements of it. The jury's out, and they're called puzzle switches for a good reason. It is puzzling. Just ask Craig. He's spent more than a few moments trying to figure out what way the switch is actually thrown. Eventually, I will go beyond the current toggle control of the tortoise switch machines to 2-button entrance exit control through a computer chip. That's the way you solve things like this, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm getting close. So we added, the first thing I did was to add that second main track that this outbound freight is on. That then told me where the space was and how to lay out the industrial sidings. I had always anticipated putting industry along the wall here as flats and the like, and I ended up putting in 6 spurs on that. And now I have to populate it. Okay, back to the spins diagram. Well, here we've got actually quite a bit to work with, and so the industries that are along here either presented themselves as this one did, and to a certain extent this guy, and I'll talk briefly in a moment about them, or otherwise represent industries that really were in Eugene historically and rail served. I told you that I moved the Nabisco bakery. Well, there it is. Just simply adapting Walther's commercial structures, which in this case, it just needed to be generic, and that was sufficient for me. We'll come to Weimar here in a moment but this is an old Campbell chemical plant that they kept way back when Leo Campbell was running the show. We were down there in the LA area. They got for a while into actually doing some plastic molding, and I had one of those kits. I had started construction on it when I was back on the East Coast, grad school and the Army, and there it had sat. It still is. It has made its way across the country and in storage for decades. It finally has come out. Still doesn't have its bow roof on it. That'll come, but at least there's something there for a plastics factory. And yes, indeed, there was a Emerald Plastics in Eugene. It doesn't show on this diagram, but I got to casting around for a name for what I thought was probably a fictional one. And thought, well, in Eugene, there's a lot of emerald that they employ. So Emerald Plastics. Then lo and behold, I was showing the picture of this to Dave Clune. He says, "Oh yeah, Emerald Plastics." Bingo. The other is that I do like that Walther's cold storage building. It's a generic structure. I try to avoid, I'm increasingly trying to avoid Walther's structures because it's just too convenient. Everybody's layout looks like Walthersville. But at least I took this one and extended it. So it starts out as a 4-panel structure. I expanded it to 6. So at least it has something a little different about it. Okay. Weimar. Well, Weimar did show on as being rail served back in '77 in a warehouse. I have no pictures. The current Weimar warehouse is located a little off. It is no longer rail served, and it's not located immediately on the rail heading. It's a different structure. So Google Earth did not help me on that. I found the new structure, but I couldn't find the old one. So okay, what am I going to do for a warehouse? Well, what do warehouses look like that were built in the 50s here in Oregon?
Campbell City.
They're bow roofed, lift slab construction. This is really easy to do with foam core, although the bow roof presents its own challenge. Nonetheless, I ended up doing that and put Weimar. And why Weimar? Well, we've got a fun little tale to tell about our daughter. When we brought her up to Oregon State to put her into school, we bought her a Weimar card, membership card, because you're going to need this. 18-year-old just, yeah, I don't need that. About 6 months later, we get this phone call from her. My wife gets this call. She says, "Mom, there's this neat store here in town, Weimar. They've got everything." Yes, dear. We told you. So Weimar and out in McMinnville, I mean, that's our Costco. And Weimar does really well for us, and I just had to pay homage. So that's the way I got to Weimar. Skiller and Oil, I was originally gonna try to cram 2 oil dealers on this short, actually 18-inch spur. Couldn't do it, but I needed somebody. And I got to talking with Dave and Dave Clune, and then his wife Margie came online. I was just saying, just trying to sort out an oil dealer, a likely oil dealer there along where Oil Dealer Row was on the north side of Eugene. I'd called Dave because I remember on the times that I'd gone into Eugene, driving into town down from Corvallis, that there was this string of bulk oil plants there on the north end of downtown, north of downtown. But it's no longer there. So I call up Dave and says, Dave, am I losing my mind? Were there oil dealers? He says, oh yeah. So then we got into a long discussion, and it turned out that they had used Skiller and Oil as their heating oil supplier. So good enough for me. It was going to be Skiller and Oil. And John Brock, my 6'10" friend, went hunting around on the internet and found the now formerly registered, that's currently lapsed trademark symbol for Skiller and Oil. It's this little sunny thing, stylized little sun. Turned out that Skiller and Oil was an independent oil dealer. You can still find this on, if you Google them. There in Eugene, they had probably a half dozen gas stations, independent gas stations at one time, that they sold sunny gas. And so just a little bit of poking around and we get to Skiller and Oil. We adapt a Walther structure and a couple of other tanks where we can get them, and now I've got an oil dealer and an independent one, which is good. I've already got over at Oak Ridge, there's a Standard Oil facility that was there historically, and so that satisfies the desire to have a big name on the railroad that way. Finally, the 6th and final of these spurs that I needed to fill, I was really casting around for it, and nothing was really popping as I would look over the spins diagrams. It wasn't really popping and saying, you know, you really got to model that. Well, so I sent a note out to several people. Dave Clune was one of them, and a couple of others who are similarly have the mindset of prototype modeling. So they had been to my railroad and operated on it, and they knew what I was up to. And he says, this is a question I would have posed historically to Tom. I really miss Tom Dill, and these guys were all, we're all in that boat. And he says, guys, I'm challenged to come up with what the industry, the 6th and final industry I'm going to put here. Well, Ken Roth down there in the Corvallis area came back at me and says, Bill, just take a look at your freight car fleet and identify what car type is underused or not used in that fleet. Really great suggestion. Milgauns. So, okay, we start looking for steel fabricators. There were 2 big ones in Eugene, no surprise there. American Steel was one of them. It's since been merged into something still higher, but American Steel certainly fits for the era that I'm dealing with. Here I'm using more of that Clever Models size corrugated iron siding, and bashed a Walther's traveling crane to fit the very limited space I had. But out of that, I get a reasonable representation as a building flat for a very functioning industry. So that's the way I populated Eugene's industry. I explicitly did not put any of the sawmills that proliferate around Eugene there, because I've got big mills elsewhere on the railroad, and I just didn't need it. I needed other variety than just for operational interest. Okay, across the Willamette, we get to Eugene, or get to Springfield. Again, I heavily used that 77 spins diagram. Indeed, I'm really close to being track for track at Eugene, or at Springfield. have a lot more information and it shows, there's a lot more care that I've gone into there. Springfield Depot, we'll talk about it in a minute, but that was a major thing. For a long time, I thought I was gonna have to scratch build it. Thank God the SP Society decided to actually do a depot kit for it, that is that depot. And as you can see, there's a lot more industry out there. And we'll talk about most of this, although this one I won't talk about. That is a gift from Harry Hutchins, who, under the byline Harry Bonham, did several articles for Craftsman back in the early 1990s. And Stan, you actually might remember this one as being at Tom's over on a shelf. It never had a space on Tom's layout, but when Tom saw me building Springfield and doing seriously, says he realized that this is where that structure needed to go. Harry had actually drawn plans and then a second article on building this model of the Tilbury cement reload plant that was located just beyond the Eugene Depot. I spotted it when I actually had successfully hitched a ride nominally as a reporter on one of the shakedown runs for 4449 down there. But I was getting off at Springfield, and there's this very modelable cement plant sitting right over there. And I says, wow, someday I got to do that. Well, I actually pulled out the articles again. I'd always tagged it. And then suddenly Tom says, hey, you got space to have Harry come up and let's do a official presentation? I says, yeah, you betcha. So I've got Harry's model. It was a reload plant that was probably put in there in 1962. I'm a little bit rubber about years about what, and I won't have any problem keeping that when I get the clock turned back to the 1950s. It's okay. It just is. But obviously, I just think I've always thought of that as being a very neat structure. Overland Models actually did it in brass once upon a time, in O scale. I remember seeing one at on a layout tour, I think at Fresno. Sorry, that's Charlie Comstock, by the way.
Time for me to kill mine.
Anyway, so here we are. And how do we fill out the rest of Springfield? Well, starting with the depot, as I said, the kit was done for the society by Bantam Model Works. It's an interesting kit. You need to take your time building it. When I say interesting, I'm accustomed to having laser kits where I've got siding that is just the single walls. This actually uses a MDF, very thin MDF inner core to which you laminate the siding and all the windows and the like. So build it up. You'll see that the Springfield Depot still exists. It is the Chamber of Commerce. It's been moved from its original location, but nicely preserved. And it's back to its original as constructed trim paint scheme. Over the years, the railroad simplified that very nice Victorian era trim to something more like this. This is 1950s and 60s trim. That actually made it more complicated to build the kit as designed. It would be easy to just hit all the trim with brown paint and move on and then just put it on. But no, I had to actually pick and choose which pieces of the trim needed to go on that. And so then we were off and working that way. But I'm grateful that kit came out. It is a Type 18 depot, the second most prolific standard depot design on the SP. There were 55, 57 of them. Obviously, there was one in Springfield. It stretched across the whole SP system from Oregon to Arizona, and I don't think there were any in New Mexico. But this was the depot that was then replaced by the Type 22, which American Model Builders did, that it was the most prolific depot design. And you can see a lot of similarities. The big difference is that the upper agent's quarters, the upper level, was turned 90 degrees to the tracks, whereas the 22 has the gable going the other way. It's kind of a big difference, besides the fact that this has very Victorian elements to the siding. Anyway, that ultimately got pushed through and finished and on the railroad. Again, I used the resources, Henry Bender's book on the standard depots. This is a soft cover that the SP Society had done. Oh, by the way, that also included that photo of the Salem freight house that I used to help me over at Eugene. And then Jean-Guy Dubé is an architect's draftsman who has done beautiful drawings. In fact, quite a few of his drawings appear in Henry's book. But this allowed me to get more detail of just the internal walls of a Type 18 depot. And I did put an interior. It's a semblance of an interior, but the biggest thing is to have light passing through the windows the right way. And yes, if you have any interest in that book at all, my recommendation is get on it now. Signature Press, who did that book, is in the process of closing down. And I highly recommend the book. If you have any interest at all in SP depots, that's the place to begin. Otherwise, for Springfield resources I used, I included a Chamber of Commerce published book from the late 1990s. And we'll see a picture or two from that later on. Google Earth was of great use, and then just plain field work, going down there to Springfield and shooting pictures. And here's the spins diagram. And okay, I didn't put drill 3 in, but just about everything else that you see here is on my railroad in some form or other. So, okay, Hexion is the current name of what you started about 1960. Borden Chemical came in and built the beginnings of that plant right on the Willamette. Viewable, and yeah, viewable from the street. You got to be careful, and I'll talk more on this in a moment, but shooting industrial pictures in the post 9/11 era is something you want to be careful about. Stay on public property, and if you are stopped, be very kind with whoever stopped you about it. Jeff and I carry cards probably that get me out of a little bit of trouble that way. That amazing what a retired officer's ID card will do.
Model railroad hobbyist business card is really useful too, when you
That
say
too.
you're doing it for a model railroad.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, next one up was Globe Metallurgical, National Metallurgical, Globe Metallurgical at one time. I said that I worked off of photos from that Chamber of Commerce book. This is the only photograph I have of that facility. It is very small. And I used combining glass to look at that at times, but clever model stuff really helped me out. They had what they call a steel mill or structure, which is mostly what that inner core is. And I just got to looking at the photo and saying, oh, it looks like I need lean-tos on either side. I knew I needed a separate loading facility, unloading facility. Dave Kloon had talked about switching that facility, and the rule was that you could not get a locomotive into that closed structure. So if you have to reach in, you better be grabbing another car to reach in with. But again, I was able to adapt some stuff. Fairly straightforward, add a few extra details to it. And it starts turning into a pretty credible industry. Silicon refiner. They take sand and turn it into quality silicon for various industrial purposes. And it turns out silicon has a lot of purposes, a lot of industrial uses. Taking advantage of cheap electrical power. Rossboro. And here I've broken it up for my field photos shot down there just at Rossboro. This is, gosh, it's a huge facility, and you'll see here in a moment when I get to the Google Earth part of it. Hard for you to see in person. You can see it far better, but this funky siding that's along here says Rossboro Lumber on there. And I knew that that was something I wanted to replicate, and I was able to do it, and I'll tell you how I did it in a moment. And some of these other structures down here were also all part of that complex. So the model, again, foam core and that clever model siding. This is out of their wood siding part. The Rossboro sign, again, I'm sorry, it doesn't photograph particularly well, but you saw the real photograph doesn't photograph particularly well. It's north facing. That was simply a matter of running the cardstock twice through the printer. The first time put the siding down, and the second time I used the stencil font from PowerPoint and it's really close to the way that real sign looks. So built this thing up. You can see a lot of plastic roof trusses that I had to build up, but and this is a horrible condensation of a really long facility. This thing goes on for well, I think all of that complex is well beyond a quarter mile long. In reality, but you do what you have to and get it on there. It passed the Tom Dill test. Tom came in on it, looked at it, and said, "Yep, Bill, you actually captured the major features there at Rossboro." And that was of significance because one of the last jobs Tom did on the railroad was running the Springfield switcher. And sitting right alongside that sign on that switcher. So if Tom said it was good, I don't need to go any further. I need obviously detail to add, but I've got the core already. Continuing on, these warehouse type structures were pretty straightforward to build up. You just have to get at it, and more of the bow roof construction. And nesty resins, or at least that's the way it appears on the 77 spins diagram, was out there along 28th Street. I could see it when I went down for doing my field photography. I could see it off in the distance. It wasn't that particular trip. I wasn't really prepared to go up there on 28th to shoot it. Along came the pandemic, and oh no, we're not going to make a separate trip down to 2 hours down to Springfield and 2 hours back, and just for that. So I get on Google, find the satellite photo, find the street view from 28th Street, and from that I can start putting together something that starts credibly looking like a chemical plant. So, and this is a matter of using pike stuff structures and then a whole lot of tanks that I scratch built. These tanks I think are Plastruct kit, and this is a kit bashed Walther's refinery tower. So again, you just grab what you can where you can. I'll just note this structure is another Campbell grain elevator. It actually was a Canadian prototype I have learned over the years, but that was built when I was in grad school. It has followed me all over the country. The grad school was in New Jersey, so, Army was in Virginia, Eventually got my major career down in the Bay Area. And then followed his way up here, still in pretty good shape. And it says, that one has survived, it belongs on this railroad. And there were, historically, there were a couple of grain elevators out there along that branch. Okay, well, this has been kind of a mishmash of a couple of things. Kind of a message I want to say is that this is my first real attempt to be more of a prototype modeler. I knew that it was going to challenge me at times. I have to scratch build a lot more things than I might have adapted, but that's actually a good thing. As I say, I'm not quite a Waltersville. And it sends one down a lot of different paths. I hope you've seen how I attacked these different structures, that they came from a lot of different places. The inspiration came from little photos, or just in the case of Weimar, well, okay, what was the logical way to have a warehouse in that era? Books, rail historical societies, the internet chat groups have provided at least a little bit of stuff, field work in terms of photo expeditions, Google Earth. It has been very satisfying to model a bit more accurately and prototypically, but in the end, it all supports an operating model railroad. And we have been very much in operation. With that, if you're interested, I have a blog. I'm up to 270 postings on that now, and I'm contactable. And if you need, I've got cards that have this information on it. Those of you coming out to Mac, it's 45 minutes. I just timed myself coming here. We are right there. I do not recommend taking Wilsonville Road, which actually does connect in eventually to just there. I have done that once. That is a very curvy road.
But it was fun.
A little bit of a chuckle about this is that my grandmother actually was raised about 2 miles from where we're standing. So this is, you know, my great grandfather had a homestead out here. So my roots go kind of deep here in Wilsonville, but I'll say don't take the Wilsonville Road to get there. Instead, drop down I-5 to what basically is the next exit 278, which is for Ayland Road and Aurora. It used to be Aurora and Donald. The truck gas stations are there. The arrangements here have recently been revised. It is a whole lot easier to get onto Ayland Road instead of some of the conflicting traffic that was there. Ayland Road becomes McKay Road. It joins, it T-bones into 219, the road to River Road to St. Paul from Newburgh. And just a short 3 miles up is the signal that puts you on the new portion of the Highway 18 bypass. Shoot out there, catch up eventually beyond Dundee on 99. Before you get to Lafayette, you turn left over to the earlier portion of Highway 18's bypass around McMinnville. It'll take you by the Evergreen Museum and the hospital, but that's the fast way that avoids a lot of signals and traffic and a lot of other stuff. So I just want to say that's the way that I recommend. Actually, anytime I'm headed to Portland, most of the time I will use that routing, even though it adds some extra mileage. It really avoids a grind through Tiger. And more locally to Mac, and I've got a half dozen or a dozen sheets that have both these maps on it. Whoops. I hit some.
Here we go.
Yep, got it. Try to undo, hit again. If you go the way I recommend, you'll be coming in here. You just go through that first signal, go straight through, it kind of curves around. You'll eventually get up to 2nd Street. There are a couple of other streets that go over here to Hill Road. I'm on what is the far west end of McMinnville on Horizon Drive, and it's just one full block up from 2nd Street. It's Horizon Drive. Otherwise, use the address and your GPS and you'll get there. don't park in front of the mailbox.
Yeah.
We have a prominent model railroader who is also retired from the postal service, who's the only one of my crew who ever parked in front of the mailbox and got a note from the post office saying, no, no, no. He gets razzed regularly. Okay, that's me. That's what I had. That's what I got.
So, Bill, what's your choice for printing in your buildings? What kind of printer do you use?
Do you, what?
What's your choice for a printer when you?
Oh, print, just my normal desktop printer.
No, brand,
Oh, it happens that I have a Canon
yeah, okay.
and it does, prints the color, does just fine. And I say 65-pound stock. Normal copy paper will be more like 20-pound stock. But you need a little bit more substance with it. The other thing that I learned with that is, although there is a more permanent form of Elmer's glue sticks that might serve, I went to using, thanks to my local art store in McMinnville, Stockton, UHU is a German glue maker, basically the German version of Borden's Elmer's glue. I have been very satisfied. When I put stuff together and do the lamination with it, it stays. When I've done it with more conventional Elmer sticks, it starts peeling. I mean, so I say there is a more permanent form of it, but you're likely to have to go to the same kind of source of supply that I've already done for the who go to an art store, because you need something that's really going to stick.
Have you ever used Sanborn fire maps?
I have looked at Sanborn maps. I've tried using them. They, first off, is that they don't cover all the places that I would like to cover. But even with Eugene, which is covered, or Springfield a little bit, they've actually been of only marginal use. Mostly, one of the biggest things is that you're always compressing. And the other thing is that I'm modeling in the latter half of the 20th century. Sanborn kind of stopped doing a lot of detail by World War II. So that's not bad, but it is, there's a challenge. I will also note that we all face a challenge for those of us modeling West. Actually, modeling the East also has this apply. Walther structures actually are Midwest masonry. I had an interesting chat with Craig Biscayr, rest in peace. Craig was a great modeler, modeling the 1892 Housatonic Railroad in Connecticut. He was based in northern New Jersey. Actually was nominally younger than I had the good fortune at Sound Rail this last year to carpool with Craig on one of our layouts that we attended. And this was my second major time to thank Craig for profusely for the inspiration he had provided me way back when I was designing my railroad. He's one who convinced me to do blogging. He didn't know that he was convincing me, but his blog was something that I read religiously. He stopped blogging in 2012, went over to Facebook. I don't do Facebook, but I was already in this house and building my railroad. So the damage had been done. But Craig and I compared notes about architecture and structure materials. He faced, and the Eastern routine is a different architecture than what shows up around 1900, if you will, is kind of the target date for a lot of Walther's masonry structures. 1900 until World War I. You'll see a lot of it that way. Obviously, the Northeast was built much earlier than that, and that has to be reflected in the architectural style. So that means a lot of scratch building. Out here in the West, in many ways, we grew up in the 1920s. Concrete and corrugated iron. And some masonry in the downtown areas, but even here in Oregon, we are known to get earthquakes. And we've certainly replaced an awful lot of masonry structure in schools over the years. But so you're in the business of scratch building. So techniques that help you, and this paper modeling technique that I'm describing here is a useful one in your kit box. You can also get brick textures, including windows and doors and all of that kind of thing that you need. I just encourage you to look. It is well worth looking at. So there we are.
Question.
Yeah.
Some good range. You mentioned on your layout diagram, you mentioned the Marcola branch. Did the SB run up to Marcola?
One time, yes. They ran 480s out there.
Looks like there was a big mill in Marcola at one time.
Well, they're,
At Marco up to Wendling, when
yeah,
Marco on a farther up, Mabel,
Yeah.
Wendling, yeah.
yeah.
Couple of them, actually.
Okay, and then when you drive over to Sweet Home, after you get out of Marcola going on north and east, it looks like there's railroad grade on the highway and there's old bridge abutments. If there was a logging road or line or
They,
something.
yeah, you've got all of that sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
actually, yeah, it'd be kind of important and useful to talk about this right now, or germane, timely. Just published by the SP Society, written by Joe Strapak and Tom Dill. Last publishing effort that Tom was involved in. There's a book on SP's 480 locomotives, the 12-wheelers, which were uniquely well suited to what are referred to as wooden axle branches. Light rail, yeah, pretty shoddy right-of-way maintenance, construction and maintenance. The 480 turns out to have been a ideal, its brief moment in time in American railroad history. Really was at the transition point between original construction in the 19th century and transition to more modern steel rail and steel wheels. So, but there was a period in the 1890s when the 480 was a wonderful solution for tractive effort on that flimsy original rail that existed. So that's why we ended up, and because they were lightweight in terms of axle loading, we ended up with quite a few of the SP's fleet here in Oregon. To be replaced by GE 70-tonners. So if you remember the Springfield area, seeing a lot of SP and then later Weyerhaeuser 70-tonners, yeah, just think of them as descendants of the 480. Any other questions?
How's the tree project?
Still building tree. I'm still building trees. If you come out to see me, you will see where I currently am kind of stockpiling the trees that I'm building. I'm at a real slow pace right now, about a dozen of a month that I get built. So,
Unfortunately, I read your blog.
and when you look at the layout, you'll see there's no way that'll get fully forested in my lifetime. And I'm okay with that. Anything else? Yeah.
You so far have done structure, track work, and electrical. You haven't. And I saw the bridge has scenery.
Yeah.
In, but not landscape.
Yeah, that'd be the terrain is virtually in.
Have you been tempted to stage the work any differently, complete a scene? Are you kind of anxious?
I did a little bit. Historically on this railroad, if I'd been left to my own timeline, I would have gone scene by scene, which is what you're kind of implying. Earlier forms of presentations I've done have talked about that as being a very valid way to go about building a railroad. When I started this project in August of 2012, I thought, gee, there's a high probability that sometime during my lifetime and the life of this layout, that we're gonna get another NMRA National in Portland. And I wanna be part of that. 2 months later, I learned we were gonna have one, and it was 2015. And I was in a mad scramble to complete the main line. I knew this was my one shot on the national scene that I was gonna get. And so I scrambled. The Golden Spike was driven in April of 2015. I've already alluded to the first formal full operating session as being June of 2015. I held 2 more sessions with my local crew, and the 4th operating session on that railroad was done as part of the OPSEG program at the National. I just made it, and I say just, just. It was a very raw railroad. I sent a note out to the guys who were had signed up for the OPSEG operation. Sometime in the late spring, I said, guys, or maybe it was early summer or even, said, guys, the railroad is really raw. It has barely been brought into operation. If you want to bow out and choose a different railroad, I was the guy who did all the assignments for the OPSEG on that one. Said, I'll be no harm, no foul. There's nothing. I can put you on some really great layouts. But if you want to back out, just let me know. No one did. What eased my anxiety level by quite a bit was when I went back through the list of people, and I realized half of them had been my regular lunch mates for what was called DCC lunch that we used to do in the San Jose area. In my last decade of work, I had been regular meeting with them. They knew about this railroad. They'd heard me talking about it all that time. They wanted to see it. They wanted to be part of it. Actually, I think you'll probably find, I suspect all of you are in this category. You find a model railroad that is just coming online, you want to be part of the plank owners or the initial operators of that railroad. You want to help bring a railroad into life. I understand Jeroen just did that, by the way. Darn, he didn't invite me. But anyway, yeah, and that was the case. I had half of that crew were people who I knew well from quite a while. So I said, okay, I can breathe a lot easier. If I have any electrical problems, I actually will have the crew right there to fix it, almost anything that I've done, because I had the brain trust of dealing with NCE outside of NCE itself. Mark Schutzer, who was the guy who fixed the radio system for NCE, was a regular, and Mark Duries runs the NCE chat list. So if I ran into an NCE problem, it was going to get solved. I didn't. No. Yes.
Yeah, now that you mentioned DCC, I'm curious, I'm sorry I'm late for your great presentation here. But what kind of problems did you run into with DCC? Because I'm sure.
Just simply getting decoders into a locomotive fleet.
Okay.
I had to make a quick choice as I was bringing the railroad alive. I had a lot of equipment from the 50s that I had routinely run on the club layout that I'd been in down in the Bay Area. And I would love to be operating it, but I knew that all of that was going to take hard wiring of decoders.
Right.
And on the other hand, I had a batch of stuff, and actually more and more of it coming online and available from Athearn was just going great guns in the late aughts and the early teens, producing SP models. And all I had to do was open it up, pull out the quick plug and put in the TCS decoder that I was standardized on, and away we were running. Blank out the gyro lights because a gyro light needs to be controlled separately from a headlight.
Okay. Right.
Eventually I will get in and rewire, all the gyro lights, A to LEDs and B to being on a separate circuit.
Do you find TCS as your best option on your model?
At the time I made my selection, yes, that was TCS for all my silent decoders. That was a good selection for me. I do have a couple of things with NCE's fleet decoder that also has been very robust for me. Otherwise, the sound equipped, I'm standardized on soundtracks.
And what about your 1950 era equipment? Do you run any of that? with
Not yet.
TCS? Ah, yeah.
Not
I'm
yet.
curious about, I have my own brass collection in HO scale, and then I'm also a member of Powerland, Mile Railroad Club, and we've had donations of brass locomotive, steam locomotives that are very prototypically painted for SP.
Yep.
And we'd like to start converting them, but I'm curious as to how.
For this, I will actually lean on my friendship with Mark Schutzer, who's kind of blazed a trail well ahead of me. And I have access to photos that he shot, and downloaded them, for me. It's not available to others, but I have some hints about how to go at it, for the hard wiring. Basic thing is that Mark, a lot of times, ends up putting the decoder within the engine portion, not in the tender.
Oh, not in the tender.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you're absolutely adding wipers to get the other electrical side taken care of, but it all done within the locomotive, and put the speaker in the smoke box.
So did you keep, or did they keep the same wiring that the original?
Yeah, you end up having to rewire anyway, because
Pick up off of all wheels.
well, you want to get as much pickup as you can.
Sure.
As redundancy is a good thing.
And what about people like capacitors?
I have not ventured down that path. I will, but I haven't gone there yet.
I'd be tempted to load that tender with the.
Yeah, oh, yeah, exactly.
Then there's-
That would be a good use. And the question then simply gets to being, okay,
Wiring.
wiring and the wiring between two pieces that are normally supposed to be able to be pulled apart.
Right.
The nice thing about most of Soundtrack's decoders, that doesn't include the 21 PNM, is that they'll have a socket on them,
Yes, that's good.
possibly hidden under shrink wrap, but it's in there for their own current keeper. So it's just
Yeah,
plug and go.
That's what I'm kind of looking for. I operate on the KISS rule, by the way, if you guys know what that is.
It's one of the reasons I did not go with the SU is because they wanted you to solder 3 wires to very
small
nasty
pads.
locations on the board.
That's what.
no, I mean, it's personal choice about things, but for me, kind of the choice to go with Soundtracks was made for me because Athearn standardized on Soundtracks and is staying with Soundtracks.
And on your
It happens to be a US maker, so it's not dependent on China. And as a retired federal employee and a retired Army Reserve officer, I will wave the flag and support a US manufacturer where I can. You know, especially when we're talking about, basically, they're equal in terms of cost and generally equal in terms of complexity. But I do not like choices that ESU has made about the function settings, and Soundtracks has provided a very clear path to get back to simplifying as to those primary 0 through 9 functions. Those are incredibly important functions,
Right.
and they better be assigned to something that you really are going to use.
And then another question, I'm sorry, I'm drilling you here, but on the Athearn units, have you converted any of the older blue box type with the older open motor?
Not yet. I expect when I get into any that way. It may be a remotoring project
Right,
simply because the old motors draw too much current.
you're exactly. I wondered what your idea was on that too, because I have a few of those too that
No, I've got quite a bit, but fortunately overcome by what's been produced more recently.
right, and what motor would you put in there? But I mean, a can motor, obviously, but
I mean, in years gone by, I would have said a Canon motor. They were routinely available. They aren't available anymore. I've got about 20 of them, but they are those 20 are being carefully shepherded to very primary projects. I have a C9 consolidation that will be one of the first ones to pick up one of those motors. And it turns out to be my third brass steam locomotive that I ever bought, and is in my parlance, it is old and reliable.
yeah, I have.
So it has earned its way early on to,
So the older Canon motors are excellent.
yeah.
Yeah, I have about 3 Sunset brass steam engines. They were Sam. But they have the can motors in them already, but DC, so.
Yeah.
I thought, well, all I have
Yeah,
to do then is isolate it from the frame, right?
Right, yeah, pretty much.
And then get the decoder, and you recommend the decoder in the boiler?
If you can figure out a way, yeah, or maybe even up under the cab roof.
That's right, they're small enough.
So it comes down to current draw.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Roger, Ross, do you have any questions? All right.
Good
So,
job, Bill.
Thanks.
Thought I had the volume turned down.
Able.
Those are some really good speakers. Okay, so John just anticipated my next request. And he's going off to get the raffle tickets, because yes, we do have door prizes. We'll try. Should have come over here. Figure out what the difference. And this month it's Whistle Stop.
We don't have raffle tickets, so do we?
Maps, if anybody wants to come out to me.
Oh, there's John with the ticket.
The chief judge generally works, you big good bill.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But you might wanna just grab them.
Well, I'd be not.
Well, else fails, she'll end up at your next wife's service.
Yeah, that's for you.
Where did the coffee can end up? Oh,
I got it on, we're gonna do a pass through to get the,
No, really.
you need to tear them up and put one in the can and then we'll do the drawing.
Oh, that's right. Well, we're waiting for that.
Since we're all here, you don't need name rank for cereal.
No, we don't.
Or blood type.
Just Carolina perspiration on half.
And now, I'm not gonna take one because I work in a hobby shop and guys.
Good, that means you can draw numbers.
I'm at the point in life where I don't really need any more, except, gentlemen, we have a shortage in the industry. Pork. We can't get any from our suppliers. So if you know anybody's got a stash, might try to push their arm to get it.
Oh, and if you haven't heard, Hobby Smith is under new ownership now. Jerry has bought it out from Ron. Ron has retired.
Oh, really?
It actually pretty much happened prior to Ron's European adventure at the end of August. But they wanted to wait till he got back.
Not tell anybody, and of course, it got out eventually.
Johnny used to work in there part-time.
Yep, I am.
Did they get the front door fixed?
No,
It's hopefully in the next couple, 3 weeks.
They gotta get specialists in there to rebuild all that.
Okay, Larry sent me a video. Some of you might have seen it. It did make its way onto Facebook recently. The hazards of model railroading in Australia.
You hate sound.
I don't hate sound, it's just very loud. And that's not doing what I wanted it to do.
Sure, sorry.
Put it around your screen.
Still not doing what I wanted it to do. Hang on, we will beat this. Okay, zoom. This. All right, that was not zoom.
So that project I was working on in Estacada, this month. Known as parents print along. So
Alright.
send to us.
This can go away.
So it's a useful.
Oh, I know what I need to do.
Do that.
Sure, yes, we're doing.
It's needed to be on the right screen, that's all.
Let's see. For the others.
Hopefully, guys, you're now seeing this. Because this now needs to move over here.
Where's your screen image from?
All right. Why does this not look like what I think it should be?
Because that happens to be my old house and sisters.
Okay, did you email me something else?
Roy texted it, yes.
So you sent it by text?
Yeah, that's what I was asking you.
Thought you emailed it to me.
No. So you may not have it.
Oh, hang on. YouTube.
Just Google on the internet machine.
So
Yeah.
this is recently in Sisters, Larry?
Tell you the truth, I'm not sure when the video was made. It was a Veterans Day thing. I had a house in Sisters, I sold it to a flipper, and then I got a phone call from a friend saying, tell me about this Tollgate subdivision. He had bought the lot and the remodeled house where I used to have.
Well, we had snow out in Estacada about 3 weeks ago. And it was interesting.
And
Okay.
Oh,
I don't care about snake.
there it is,
Where?
Railroad, Australia Railroad snake.
That's me searching.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. That's what we want. Except now I actually.
It's over on the left-hand side if you want to get the volume on.
Thank you. Oh. This is doing this thing.
Train track sets.
8 different places to do sound.
Yeah, this is for a job that we're on our way to now. So we're going to a home in Yandina area, and they've actually got a snake on the gentleman's toy train set, one of those big indoor train track sets. Very, very cool. But apparently there's a snake in one of the tunnels. So obviously the trains can't go around. There's a snake blocking the road. So we're going to head out and catch it and relocate it.
This is a common occurrence in Florida too.
I moved shortly on the weekend, I'm down, I've only just put the thing in, probably don't really want to the weekend.
I was like, oh, maybe on the track.
Looks like a nice layout. You feel that having a mouse in your layout was bad.
I guess it looks like it's on height. Brown tree snake. I got a tree snake. Yeah, brown tree snake. Oh, they'll definitely buy. Where's it coming out? Oh, really? No, I'm gonna put them there. Well, it was to go that up the shed up on top of it. A year. Good chance. There he is.
He's either figured out it's not venomous or he's really stupid.
We got fine, we're going to continue doing this. In the nocturnal species, that's why it's played in there. If it was nice and brown snake, I'd expect him to cruise in there and try and track. Awesome. One to go, right, thank you. Climb the tree snake. Back in the trees where you belong, away from the model train set.
Yeah. Unless you want to see a lady purely panic, and deservedly so. All right, so.
I used to be on the island of Guam in the Navy. There was no snakes in the last few years. Brown snakes, go figure. Get you right on the Australian. Came in by cargo insurance. Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere I've got the ability to stop sharing, I think. But I'm not sure where it is.
I thought brown snakes were venomous, but he didn't seem to.
I don't know.
Was there for a couple months in Australia, saw him at a distance.
Good enough.
That was good enough.
I got that video from a friend and sent it to Jeff and my son, and he said, I see your video and I raise you to a model railroad video.
Go to the screen there with everybody's picture, with your thing, go to the top there, those little levels, and just change your view. If that one does it, or there it goes, there's a menu that popped up on the right hand side. There, it says menu, scroll up. Get there, scroll down.
That
On the
says
right hand
mute.
side, yeah, go to the three little dots.
Nothing about
No,
that.
not on you.
See, Brian didn't want to be an AV guy.
There we go. Now it shows
Shows up
up.
the other screen.
Stop share. Alrighty. So now everybody's looking at the screen, which is
Looking at the screen, which is looking at.
getting very Inception-like for Ross and Roger. Alrighty, so. Your tickets in here too? Everybody's tickets are in here?
Yep.
All right, John, since you're the one who's not taking a ticket.
Yeah, they're putting it under the screen.
Oh, there's none in here. All right, last three digits, 503.
Gee. We're gonna make it fun. Pick a card in. Top corner should say how much it is. No, just draw the next one.
Oh, I thought you were just gonna have John do it.
Yeah, John had a good idea.
How about 064?
It's one of us.
You're gonna get a single?
And you get to grab, okay.
I had to stand up.
This one is 502.
That's me.
Wow.
Since I no longer have skin in the game,
Yes.
505. Our presenter for the day.
501.
Yo.
Good.
Okay, 066.
Five zero four.
Hey. I'm getting my exercise today.
I know what the number is. 065.
All right.
Thank you.
Pick a card, any
All
card.
right.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any business for the division? Show and tell that they brought? The blue box contest, the selection is back there in the 2 boxes. Take what you will. It was donated to the division. Anything that doesn't get taken will get hopefully sold on the 3rd.
So, okay.
And then I brought some flyers for the show in March for the Willamette modelers. It'll be up at the Armory where it was last year, north into town.
Beaver. Up kind of by the airport, off the end of the runways, off of Marine Drive.
See an airplane coming at you really fast. It's too late. No.
Right, quickly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd also like to remind everybody about the Willamette Valley at Rickreall.
That's
but
the one
we're
we're
the
gonna
big
be at.
one At the fairground,
Right, that's the one we'll be
and
at.
that's December 3rd, Saturday, December 3rd, and that's from the Powerland Willamette Valley Model Railroad Museum Club, so,
Hey, see
That's
you. We'll see you there.
yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you.
apparently you guys have changed names recently. You added the word museum to the name.
Yeah, it's been a couple, 3 years now since we started building and got. Yeah, we kind of have a contractual agreement for our own building on their grounds,
Right.
our land. And the western, what do they call it, Wabi, so I'm fairly new to their group since 2015. I moved here from Iowa, so I'm a foreigner here. But I've been learning the geography of the Siskiyou line because that's what we're modeling. And so it's an interesting project for all of us.
This is
And
good.
a lot of tree
2 years
making
ago.
too.
So who here hasn't seen their layout of the Powerland?
I know, I live in Salem and I haven't been there.
Oh, please, yeah.
Let me tell you something, even my wife, who casually, I take to the convention, she goes, that's pretty neat.
Yeah.
And we were down there in, was it April, May, when they had part of the museums open? There's 13
Yes.
museums there, guys.
Right.
This is something where, even if it's not last part of July, first part of August, this is where you need to take people from out of town. There's nothing like it in the Northwest.
Well, thank you. Yeah, because it's really only partially finished and Judy McInnes, who was our president, insisted that we get that Siskiyou Summit all scenic first before we progressed. And now myself and 2 others, we're drawing up the plans for the rest of the line between Eugene and Ashland.